A simple delivery turned into a moment that stayed with me for years. A worried look at my gate, a quiet conversation, and a choice that changed how I see people forever. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Tell me your city and state in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It truly helps more than you know. Now, let me tell you what happened. I wasn't expecting anything unusual that afternoon. The sun hung low, giving my front yard that tired, golden look it gets when the day is almost done. I was inside, rinsing a mug, thinking about nothing in particular, when I heard the gate creak. Not the quick open and close I was used to, but a pause, like someone hesitating. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked out the window. A delivery van idled at the curb, and a man stood by the gate. He didn't knock right away. He just stood there, one hand on the latch, shoulders slightly hunched. Even from a distance, I could tell something wasn't right. When I stepped outside, the air felt heavier than usual. He looked up, startled, like he hadn't expected me so quickly. He was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, wearing a uniform that had seen better days. His eyes were alert, but worried. Not rushed, not careless. Worried. "Afternoon," I said, trying to keep my voice easy. "Ma'am," he replied, clearing his throat. I didn't want to just leave this. He held up a small box. "There's been some trouble on my route today. I thought it might be better to hand it to you." That was when I noticed his hands shaking just a little. I opened the gate and invited him in, mostly out of instinct. The driveway felt quiet, too quiet, like the world had leaned in to listen. He thanked me, stepping inside, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The cicadas buzzed in the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and then stopped. I took the package, but instead of turning away, I asked if he was all right. He hesitated, then let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "Long day," he said. "Some days hit harder than others." I nodded. At my age, you learn not to rush people when they finally speak. I told him I understood more than he might think. We stood there, two strangers at a gate, sharing a silence that felt oddly respectful. He glanced around, maybe embarrassed, then met my eyes. "Thanks for asking," he said quietly. Not everyone does. As he walked back toward his van, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't romance or excitement. It was recognition. The reminder that even the smallest moments, the briefest conversations, can matter more than we realize. I watched him drive away, the van disappearing at the corner. The package was still warm in my hands, but it wasn't what stayed with me. It was the look on his face when he realized someone had seen him, really seen him. And I had a feeling that this was only the beginning of something I didn't yet understand. That evening, I kept thinking about him more than I expected to. I set the small box on the kitchen counter and didn't even open it right away. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the light fade from the street. The neighborhood settled into its usual quiet, porch lights clicking on one by one like a slow row of blinking eyes. I told myself it was nothing. Just a delivery, just a tired man at the end of a long route. But there was something about the way he paused at the gate, like he was deciding whether the world was safe enough to step into for one more minute. The next morning, I was in the garden early, trimming the roses that had grown wild along the fence. My hands were busy, but my thoughts wandered. I wondered if his day had ended better than it started. I wondered why I cared. Around midday, the familiar hum of a van approached. I looked up before I could stop myself. It was him. Same uniform, same van, but his posture looked different, straighter somehow. He opened the gate this time without hesitation. "Good to see you again," he said, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I returned the smile. "You too. Looks like the day's treating you better." He shrugged. "Somewhat. I was hoping I'd catch you. I wanted to thank you for yesterday." I leaned the shears against the fence and wiped my hands. "You don't owe me thanks." "Still," he said, shifting his weight, "it helped more than you know." There was a pause, not awkward, just thoughtful. He handed me another package, lighter than the first. Our fingers didn't touch, but the space between them felt charged with something unspoken. Trust, maybe, or relief. He glanced at the roses. "These are beautiful. My mother used to grow them." I felt a warmth at that. We talked for a few minutes about small things. Weather, work, how time seems to move faster the older you get. He listened carefully, like my words mattered. That alone made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "I'm glad you were home yesterday." "So am I," I replied. As he walked away, I realized something quietly important. This wasn't about a delivery or even about him. It was about the choice to open a gate, to let a moment happen instead of rushing past it. And for the first time in a while, I felt open to whatever might come next. The days that followed settled into a gentle pattern. I didn't wait by the window, but I noticed the street more. I noticed when the mail truck passed, when the afternoon breeze stirred the leaves, when the delivery van appeared at the corner. Sometimes it was him, sometimes it wasn't. On the days it wasn't, I felt a small, unexpected disappointment that I didn't bother to argue with. When he did come by, our conversations stayed simple. A few minutes at the gate, a comment about the heat, a joke about how boxes always seemed heavier on Fridays. Yet there was a growing ease between us, like two people who had agreed, without saying it out loud, to be honest in small ways. One afternoon, he arrived later than usual. The sky was gray, thick with the promise of rain. He looked tired again, but not lost like the first day, just worn. "You all right?" I asked, handing him a cold bottle of water I'd started keeping by the door. He smiled, grateful. "Yeah, just thinking a lot." I nodded. "That happens." He leaned against the gate for a moment, not crossing it, respecting that invisible line. "I don't usually talk to people on my road," he said, "but with you, it feels steady." The word stayed with me. Steady. At this stage of my life, I valued that more than excitement. I told him as much, surprising myself with my honesty. I told him about the quiet of the house since my husband passed, how silence can be comforting one day and heavy the next. He listened without interrupting, eyes kind, posture still. When I finished, he said softly, "Thank you for trusting me with that." The rain started then, light at first, tapping the leaves. We stood there, two adults who had both lived enough life to know the cost of careless words. There was no rush to fill the space. Before leaving, he said, "Talking with you helps me remember who I want to be when the day gets rough." After he drove off, I stayed by the gate longer than necessary, rain misting my arms. I realized this connection wasn't about changing our lives. It was about honoring them, about recognizing that even now, even after everything, we could still show up for each other in quiet, meaningful ways. By the time spring arrived, our brief exchanges at the gate had become a familiar rhythm, a quiet marker in the week. The roses had grown taller, their blooms spilling over the fence like they were trying to touch the street, and the warm afternoons carried a softness that made the world feel less hurried. One day he arrived carrying an unusually large package. He looked at me, hesitated, then smiled that familiar, careful smile. "I thought I'd deliver this personally," he said. "It's for you." I took it from him, feeling the weight of it in my hands, not heavy, but significant. "You didn't have to," I replied, though my voice carried a warmth that surprised me. He shrugged, glancing down the street before meeting my eyes. "I wanted to. You've been steady, like I said, and it means something." We talked a while longer than usual, letting the afternoon stretch around us. I realized as I listened to him recount little things from his week, how a neighbor had helped him with a flat tire, how the traffic seemed endless today, that I was learning more about him than I had about most people I knew. And he was learning about me in return, quietly, without judgment or expectation. As he finally turned toward his van, I said, "You know, it's strange. A delivery and a gate, and somehow it feels like more." He looked back at me, his expression thoughtful. Some moments aren't about what happens, but about who notices them. The rain started again, soft and persistent, and we both laughed at the timing. I closed the gate behind him, standing there for a moment, letting the sound of the rain fill the space. The package sat on the porch, but I didn't need to open it to understand its meaning. That evening, as I brewed my tea and watched the roses shimmer with rain, I realized how much had changed. I had learned that connection could arrive quietly, that trust didn't need grand gestures, and that even small acts of attention could make a life feel fuller. I thought about him, about the worried look at the gate, and I felt gratitude, grateful for his presence, for his honesty, and for the unexpected ways people can touch our lives when we least expect it. It wasn't a story of excitement or drama. It was something subtler: recognition, respect, and the quiet comfort of being seen. And as the evening settled into night, I felt that sense of calm and growth ripple through me, a reminder that even the smallest encounters could leave a lasting impression.